Alright, what's going on everyone? Today I want to show you how to upgrade a Magic Arena starter deck that you get for free on Magic Arena. We'll be upgrading the deck in two stages. First I'll show you how to upgrade the deck with no rares. If you're worried about rare wild cards, I'll show you how to use only commons and uncommons, and then I'll show you some rares and mythics you can use if you already have them. I do caution you to spend your rare wild cards wisely because they're very hard to get, but I'll at least show you what you can add to the deck if you have it, or if you're willing to spend rare wildcards. So today we're upgrading Back for More, which is a black-green reanimator deck. It plays things like Back for More, Order of Midnight, and Boneyard Lurker, all of which can return cards back from the graveyard, and then it plays some self-mill cards like Mire Triton, Skull Prophet, and Acolyte of Affliction, which all mill us. So we use our own cards to fill our own graveyard, and then we will return creatures from our graveyard either back to play or back to our hand. That is a reanimator deck. So the problem with this deck is the same problem that a lot of these starter decks have. There's just too many cards that don't really synergize with our strategy. Deathbloom Thallid, Twin Blade Assassins, neither of these really do what we want. I mean, it gives the impression that we care about death triggers, but we really don't. The idea here isn't to necessarily kill our own creatures, it's to reanimate big stuff from the graveyard. There's also stuff like Arasta and Treeshaker Chimera, which are big powerful rares but don't really do what we're trying to do. So those are kind of silly, don't really need those. So let's just fix it. We'll start by taking out a Llanowar Visionary for a Skull Prophet. Both of these ramp, but in this deck, being able to self-mill is really valuable, so it's definitely better in this deck. Llanowar Visionary, probably the more powerful card in a nutshell, but Skull Prophet gives us that mill ability, putting stuff from our library into our graveyard, which is what we want to do. We're also going to take out a Deathbloom Thallid for our fourth Mire Triton. This card is great, milling 2, gaining 2 for 2 mana, also has Death Touch, so it's a Death Touch blocker. That's fantastic, works as a sort of pseudo removal spell, so it's a great card, definitely works really well on this deck, definitely want 4 copies. Next we're going to take out Deadweights for either Bloodchief's Thirst or Heartless Act. This is just more optimal removal. Technically Deadweight can be returned with some of the cards in the deck, right? It can kind of be reanimated, it can be returned to hand, but it's just not a good removal spell, so I don't really care about returning it to my hand, so it's just not great. So let's get it out for some better removal that actually kills stuff. Next is where things get fun because we're taking out Sudden Spinnerets for Titanoth Rexes. The Spinnerets are a fun trick, but the Rex is an 11/11 trampler that can be reanimated, and we can cycle it to get it into our graveyard for 2 mana. So the namesake card Back for More, for 6 mana we can get an 11/11 trampler. If we can get the Rex in the graveyard, which we can do by cycling it for 2, so that's pretty cool. But we have another fun trick with this, because we're also going to take out the Twin Blade Assassins for a Carrion Grub. So first off, the Grub mills 4 cards when we play it, which is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to mill our own cards into our graveyard. So 4 mana mills 4 cards, that's fine. And then it gets +X+0, where X is the highest power among creatures in our graveyard. Meaning that if we have the Rex in the graveyard, it will be an 11/5 for 4. And if we have the Rex in hand, we can pay to cycle it, discard it, put the trample counter on the Grub, and then it's an 11/5 trampler. That's pretty cool, right? So now you see what's going on. So we're going to take out 2 Boneyard Lurkers for 2 more Grubs. The Lurkers are kind of fine, but they only return to hand, so it's like, it's not exceptionally good. So I'm kind of on the fence about it in this deck. The Grub, on the other hand, great win condition, can be an 11/5 trampler, seems pretty good, so I definitely want more of those. We're also going to take out a Llanowar Visionary for our final Grub. The Visionary is a good card, but the Grub will win us games, and it's a reanimation win condition. Definitely want that. We're also going to take out the 2 remaining Deathbloom Thallids for 2 more Titanoth Rexes. I'm actually a big fan of Deathbloom Thallid in draft. It's like one of my, I don't know if it's my favorite creature, but I really like drafting it. It's fun in draft, but not in constructed. In constructed, it's a little bit weak. So let's get our 2 Titanoth Rexes, have all the Rexes, have all the Grubs, so we can just have those big giant beaters. Finally, we're going to take out the last Visionary for a Chainweb Aracnir. This card's pretty cool because it has Escape. That means we can have a big threat that could come out of our graveyard if we mill it. It's a 4/5 that can fight a flyer when it enters the battlefield if we cast it from our graveyard. So having one of those in the deck that we can occasionally mill and just get a free creature out of the graveyard is pretty great. Also really good against rogues, all those stupid flying rogues. The Chainweb Aracnir just eats them, so that's great. Going up to 4 copies would be great, specifically for the rogues deck. And I also think it's worth taking out Arasta and Treeshaker Chimera for Beanstalk Giants. I'm not going to count this as like an official upgrade, but the thing that makes the Beanstalk Giant so good is it has power equal to our lands, even if it's in the graveyard. So if we have 6 lands, say, let's say we have 6 lands and we mill a Beanstalk Giant into the graveyard, the Carrion Grub is a 6/5 for 4. So that's pretty cool, right? Basically, the Carrion Grub is going to have power equal to our number of lands if a Beanstalk Giant is in the graveyard, because it has power equal to the number of lands. It also helps us ramp, which is pretty important since we have so many 4-drops in this deck. I think Beanstalk Giant is pretty good. I just don't really want to take out the rares for a common, but I do think it might be a little bit better. Treeshaker Chimera is cool, but Beanstalk Giant probably better. So fun fact, I don't actually think we need to add any rares to this deck. There are some really good rares for the strategy. Things like Woe Strider, for example, or Null Priest of Oblivion. Both of these work really well in this strategy, but I don't think they're absolutely necessary. Null Priest is arguably better than Back for More. It's a little bit questionable. They both reanimate a creature for 6 mana. The Back for More allows us to fight, whereas the Null Priest can be played early game if we need it and gives us an extra creature. So I personally would probably play Null Priest over Back for More, but I think Back for More is fine. Like, I don't think it's worth spending rare wild cards. Back for More works perfectly fine. I think it's reasonable. And Woe Strider probably replaces things like Polukranos and Nightmare Shepherd, which I don't think either of those is really nice. I think both of those cards are good, so I don't think adding Woe Strider is that big of a deal. It could also probably go in place of Demonic Embrace. Both of these give us something that we can cast from the graveyard. Could also probably go in place of like a removal spell, like taking out 1 drag to the Underworld for 1 Woe Strider is probably fine, but I just don't really think these are absolutely 100% necessary. So they're there, they're worth noting. If you have any and you want to go down, 1 removal spell for a Woe Strider, if you want to take out 1 Back for More for a Null Priest of Oblivion, that's totally fine. You could also take out the Order of Midnights for Null Priests. They can't return stuff for 2 mana. You need 6 mana to return stuff with Null Priest, but it returns it to the battlefield instead of just to your hand like the Order of Midnight does. So that's basically it, but I do think there's actually a really cool alternate version of this deck where we play Lurrus as our companion. Lurrus doesn't allow us to play big stuff, so we can't play Grub, can't play Titanoth Rex, but instead we play like Mire Triton, Archfiend Vessel, Call of the Death Dweller. Mire Triton mills, Archfiend Vessel will become a 5/5 flyer if we can reanimate it, and Call of the Death Dweller allows us to reanimate Archfiend's Vessel. So we have mill, we have a great reanimation target, we have a very cheap reanimator that gives us a 5/5 flyer. We can also play stuff like Fiend Artisan. Fiend Artisan is great as a game finishing beatdown threat that doesn't really work in our version because if it's in the graveyard it's still just a 1/1. Fiend Artisan though, fantastic in mill decks where we're filling our graveyard. A Null Priest is another great reanimator for that deck that, costs 2 or less, so it works with Lurrus. We can even play like Serrated Scorpion in this deck, probably Village Rites as well as a way to sacrifice Archfiend's Vessel. Lets us dig for reanimation spells as well. So yeah, I think that's really cool. Don't know if it's worth being Golgari. It might be better going into Rakdos for Kroxa, but that's a potential as well as a sort of reanimation deck that's a little bit different, or a lot different than this deck. I didn't go with that route with this deck just because it basically means building an entire different deck. We're not really upgrading this deck. We're not upgrading Back for More. If we do that, we're basically building a different reanimator deck that uses like 2 or 3 of the same cards and that's it. But I think it could be pretty cool. So anyway, here is our upgraded deck. Check the description or the pinned comment. I will post both versions of the deck in the Arena format, so you could just copy it and import it directly into Arena. Even if you don't have the wild cards, you can still open the decks and look at them in the client. So maybe that helps you get a better idea of what the deck looks like. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.